Art is on the agenda on this edition of inLife. We'll head to Western Illinois and talk to Quincy Art Center Director Julie Nelson about a couple of their exhibits, including one that features Quincy. Then we'll explore the work of Southern Illinois artist Brent Kington, whose work is on display at the Illinois State Museum. That's next on inLife. This program is brought to you in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and through the financial support of viewers like you. Thank you. Funding for art segments on inLife is provided by the Illinois Arts Council, a state agency. Hi, I'm Becky Cramblit. Welcome to this edition of inLife. As a horse enthusiast, when I think of metalsmithing, I think of this. But today we're going to explore the work of an artist who's taken blacksmithing from a practical endeavor to an art form. We'll talk with Illinois State Museum's Bob Sill about the work of Brent Kington in just a bit. But first, we'll take you to Quincy to talk with Quincy Art Center Executive Director Julie Nelson. Dating back to the 1920s, it's been ranked as #1 among art centers outside Chicago by the Illinois Arts Council. And in addition to promoting area arts and artists, they also present exhibitions from national and international artists, including their current exhibit featuring the work of British photographer Nick Wheeler and his work in Vietnam. Julie, tell me about this exhibit and how it is different from most of the exhibits that you will see at the Quincy Art Center.
Well, this exhibit had a theme that was dictated by what we were doing with other groups. Mm-hmm. It's for Arttoberfest, and other groups are all in town doing things at the same time, including the Tin Dusters. So someone suggested, why don't we do something with the military? And then we thought, oh, wait a minute, Vietnam is probably the era, the war that the folks who are tin dusters, were most involved in. Mm-hmm. So I started looking for exhibits, and it took me a long time to end up with this one. Mm-hmm. I was looking in Vietnam, on the website, for artists and reading and so on, and I could never quite find the right thing. And one day I was on the web again, and I was almost ready to go back to the organizer and say, can we change this, please? And I saw 3 books by National Geographic of photography, and they were all by Nick Wheeler. And I thought, Nick Wheeler, I've never heard of him before, but boy, these are beautiful. So I looked further, and then I called him up, and I closed my eyes like I usually do when I'm calling somebody important, and I told him who we were and what we were doing, and I said, would you be willing to loan us some prints? And I said, I want them to be large. And he says, sure.
That was easy.
That was easy, exactly. So anyway, here is the show, and we're really thrilled with it.
Tell me a little bit about the photographer, Nick Wheeler.
Sure. Nick Wheeler was a UPI, United Press International photographer during the time of Vietnam combat and war, and was sent there and was there for 2.5 years. And took many photographs, and we have just a small selection of those, many in black and white and some in color. And he happened to be the photographer on site when Saigon fell, and took photos, very powerful photographs of the South Vietnamese swarming toward the American embassy, and he's just above the barbed wire.
He is the only photographer
that
was
right.
There, right?
He was the only photographer there, and took some really powerful pictures that are pretty gut-wrenching, and those, Newsweek magazine purchased those. And then his other photographs that we'll see, the black and white ones, appeared in newspapers around our country and around the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, why don't you show us a couple of your favorites?
Oh, I'm happy to.
All right, let's take a look.
Thank you.
Favorite photos here. This one, Mr. Wheeler shot in 1997. What is it about?
Well, it's called Water Puppet Show in Hanoi, and I talked to a man who had been, other than Nick, that had visited one of these, and he says they're very popular. Somebody must be underwater manipulating these puppets, and then the little orchestra is playing up there. But what I love about it is it's many of his things have this incredible natural composition to them. You know how he's got this dark coming down here, and there's dark coming up here, even with this diagonal thing here, and then the action is all right here.
Right.
But then you kind of go off and say, what's this beautiful paisley thing going on up here and that? So your eye has plenty of things to look at and to flow around in.
So it's almost as good as if somebody painted that.
Oh, that's right. I feel like he's like a painter with his camera. There are definitely some photographers who are more talented than others. I mean, it's very beautifully composed and done, and I don't know how the light turns out, or how things work out that way, or if he just finds the moment. A lot of them just say, I just have to be there a long time, and then the right things happen. Like, I don't know if that spray of water or smoke or whatever it is coming up all the time, and he just happened to catch it.
Right.
It's really, really.
This really is an amazing photograph, and the only one that exists, right? At this moment in time, he was the only photographer that was there.
That's right. That's right. This was when Saigon fell, and the South Vietnamese were clamoring to get out of the city, and this was the American embassy here with the barbed wire, and you can see that they're all looking up. They all want to get up here and go across it. Meanwhile, the Vietnamese inside the embassy who had worked for the Americans or with the Americans, they did not get out themselves because there was only so much room in the helicopters. And you're too young, but there used to be photographs of helicopters rising up off of the roof of the embassy, and people were just holding on to those rudders and, falling, back onto the roof and so on. And it was very sad because it was just, they knew they were done. They knew they were in big trouble with them.
Incredible talent. Well, now you have another exhibit here that is related to this one. Tell me about that.
Well, we connected with the All Wars Museum out at the Veterans Home, and they were so wonderful. They allowed us to work with them to curate a show. We had made 3 visits out there, and it was all about Vietnam memories. So it's things like uniforms and medals and flags, flags folded up, at the death of somebody, given at a funeral. But also there's a wonderful scrapbook in there of folks that didn't make it back from Vietnam. Somebody took loving care to make this thing. And they asked very carefully, could we have this in the show? I'm like, sure, of course, it's all part of it. Right. So there are some sad areas in that show, but it's really neat to have, the actual uniform there to look at. And we had a lot of veterans here the first night, and that was very rewarding to me. I thought, yes,
oh, absolutely
worthwhile.
Yeah. Now, the last exhibit that you have currently here at the Quincy Art Center shows a lot of very familiar Quincy landmarks.
That's right, that's right. It's called 3 Photographers Preserve Quincy, and that was done as kind of a collaboration or an homage to Quincy Preserves, because they go around every year in the fall to open the doors of different homes, and the Art Center was once again one of those stops. So we wanted to preserve Quincy through the eyes of 3 area photographers.
Well, let's go take a look. Julie, this exhibit features the work of 3 Quincy artists, correct? Tell me about it.
Well, we put this one together to connect with Quincy Preserves. And Jewel Gwaltney, I knew, was doing photographs of Woodland Cemetery, and she wanted to make this her whole series for this show. And Stephen Colo has done a little tiny book called Quincy as I See It. So, okay, he's a good candidate. And then Bruce Morton, he does beautiful portraits of sometimes farmhouses, sometimes not people necessarily, but things. So I thought this might be an interesting challenge for him.
So all of these artists, their work in this room represents what's special to them about Quincy.
That's right.
Tell me about Mr. Morton's work.
Well, he decided not to do homes because he said in Quincy many of the 18th and 19th century homes have been done so many times that he wanted to show a different part of Quincy. So maybe 2/3 of these have to do with the warehouse district and, behind buildings and so on. And then a few others are, of homes, but usually of details of homes.
Right.
But sometimes what I like about them is they're very symmetrical at first. You look at them and they're all lined up like this. But then when you start really looking, there are little things going on that are different on each side.
Right.
Which is just really neat. I mean, and he's got an eye. He's got a different kind of eye than the other two have.
Right.
And one time I heard a good way to do composition is to make everything perfect and then kick it.
And that's what he did.
That's what he does. Yeah, that's what he does. It's really kind of fun to see that in action.
Now, Mr. Cullo's work, he is the only one who uses some digital enhancement with his pictures.
And it's very apparent, and he's not ashamed of it.
Right.
I mean, it's part
of his art.
Part of his art, to make things look old and nostalgic and just kind of lend a mood. There's quite a mood to some of these pieces. They transport you. You could take any one of them and put them in a room, and the room would change because of the piece.
Now, the locations and the type of pictures that he chose, is there any continuity there, or is it just a little of everything?
Well, he has done a lot of bridges, I have to say that. And so there is a bridge here, and there's a bridge in another one over there that it looks like it's behind snow. It's actually a bed sheet, an old bed sheet that he's rumpled up and then spread it across somehow. I mean, I'm hoping to learn this Thursday night. He's going to be talking. And then he's interested in skies, like what different skies look like. And some of the clouds in the skies are like real intense. I mean, they're not real. They're just real strong.
I've seen that, yeah. Interesting colors, maybe.
Yeah, green, bright green. And then he's got his ubiquitous water tower. He's done tons of water towers, so there has to be one in this show.
And then Jewel Gwaltney, what is shown in her display?
Well, she tries to get the feeling of woodland cemetery, and she has two very different bodies of work in there, the colored photography and then the black and white. And the black and white ones are pretty much Victorian headstones one by one. And then she's looked into them and has done research and has asked other people about them. And then the color pieces are much larger and kind of pulled back from the headstones. It's sort of a sweeping view, not a panorama necessarily, but coming back from them. And the colors are beautiful. I mean, she's just she has such a wonderful eye.
Well, and Woodland Cemetery is definitely one of Quincy's premier historic locations.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I've heard in the Midwest, as a Victorian cemetery, it's one of the top ones, if not the top one.
Interesting. Well, Julie, thank you for showing us around today. It's been very interesting.
Oh, thank you.
You can get more information on the center, including classes and upcoming exhibits, from their website, quincyartcenter.org. When he became a dad, metalsmith Brent Kington began using his skills to make baby rattles for his son Todd. From there, his interest and his efforts in turning metal into art grew. Here to tell us about that transition and to take a look at the artist's work that's on display here at the Illinois State Museum is Bob Sill. Bob, thanks for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure.
Tell us all about this wonderful artist, Mr. Kington. He has got some amazing work here on display.
Yeah, Brent is certainly an Illinois treasure in terms of our artists, and he has, as you were talking about, these wonderful little toys, and that's sort of the beginning for Brent, was his silversmithing, and his silversmithing really took off when he started doing some of these wonderful little kid toys.
What period of time was all of this taking place?
This was in the early 60s. Brent traveled to New York in 1964 to attend a World Craft Council meeting. And while he was there, he goes to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and he sees their wonderful displays of armor, and he sees the wonderful, intricate blacksmithing that is being done in some of that metal work, and he gets like this aha moment where he says, yeah, I want to take blacksmithing and use it in metalsmithing again and make fine art with that. And so this was sort of a big, big moment for him, for Brent, to realize that he might be able to take this old traditional utilitarian form of making objects and use it as part of his fine art vocabulary.
So he's been doing this for approximately how many years?
Well, Brent is 76 now, so you know, he's been doing this for over 45 years.
Wow.
In terms of working with metalsmithing and blacksmithing.
How unusual is this type of art?
Well, I think that Brent, what really is important to know about Brent Kington too is that he was a leader in sort of spawned this whole movement because of his idea about using blacksmithing as an art form. He led the way, started a whole movement of blacksmith art through creating these conferences and these workshops and getting the word out about what could be done and learning about it and sort of resurrecting this whole tradition of blacksmithing and turning it into a craft high art form in American culture. So,
wow, very significant. Now this exhibit features a number of his works from the beginning even to present day. So why don't we start by taking a look at some of those toys that we talked about a few minutes ago.
all right.
Okay. So this is an example of some of the toys that his kid would have played with.
Yeah, I love this little case. It just shows the kinds of things that he was playing with. He's got little cannons and these little bird-beaked forms. And the bird beak is really kind of funny because Brent always sort of, I think, maybe felt a little self-conscious about his nose. He had a very prominent nose. So he makes light of his nose. And these, you know, this is a dad giving his love to his work for his child.
Right.
And so here he's saying, here's Dad, you know, and Dad has a sword and he's fighting against this cannon. And inside the cannon, if you get real close, you can see there's a little baby bird beak in there.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a son
That
and
beak is
father playing
everywhere.
together.
Yeah. Well, he has a little heart on his stomach. That's pretty cute too.
Yeah, I mean, and if you look at the surfaces and the love that's poured into the ornamentation of each piece, and these are little cast sterling and welded pieces, and so he's making some of the figures and forms out of wax and then casting that, and then he's welding on things like on the rocking horses. I mean, there's a very quixotic kind of feel to, like, charging the windmill almost here with your guy on a wooden or on a toy horse.
Right, all these little soldiers.
And he's drawn off a cartoon imagery, and
Yes.
he was really big into, all of, sort of Mad magazine, Spy versus Spy, things like, R. Crumb, and that kind of stuff, funky, cartoony imagery. And so these things are very, very light, playful, beautiful, and fun. And
it's
can you imagine being a kid, though? Being able to play with these things.
It's amazing. Well, and the fact that they're made out of sterling silver is, kind of amazing.
Sort of precious.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, over here, this is a bit of a different example. The nose still prevails.
Right. There's the little bird beak, right? And on this one, here's that same kind of figure. This is just this beautiful, ornate, elaborate, funny, little, tiny candlestick holder. And here's another one. At the top, you have a candlestick holder. The middle part, where you see the little bird perched in the circle, you can blow on that thing, and it's actually a whistle. And
Everyone needs that in a candlestick, right?
Absolutely. And then at the bottom, you have this bell. So, when it's dinner time, you could either ring the bell or
blow the whistle.
Put the candle on, and you've got it.
You're ready to go
on the table.
He was really thinking through that. A functional piece.
A very
Not only
functional
artistic, but
and
functional.
fun and whimsical and playful.
This series is from the early 80s, and the artist adds some interesting elements, doesn't he?
Right. You still, I think, if you think about those things in the 60s, late 60s, there was always a sort of implied sense of motion, of movement. Well, Brent, as he begins to sort of master blacksmithing and forged work, he begins to explore these much more abstract kind of pieces. And while they're not as whimsical, there's still some playfulness to them. But But one of the things that he adds is a sort of lyrical beauty to the work. And they become much more spiritual. And they become much more elegant. And
They have a tribal look to them as well, don't
yeah,
they?
he was looking a lot at ethnic and African masks, things like that. So let's just show you how some of these things work. And they're really kind of engineering feats, because you have this piece, and here's this beautiful mask-like face on it, and he's polychromed these surfaces, so he's actually applying paint to the surface and burnishing it and whatnot. But what's really marvelous is the way that they balance and the way they move. So he enters into this whole movement that was prevalent in the 60s and 70s with Calder and guys like that, of kinetic sculpture, where the sculpture actually has this beautiful movement to it. It's almost as though it comes alive. And some of these things were meant to be outside, where the air would, and because he started with, in the 70s he had these weather vane things. Well, he ups the whole thing into this much more elegant and beautiful kinetic work.
Well, and just his understanding of physics, and how to get that to move the way it does, and balance, and
you have this one little point that it rests on. And so he's intuitively and masterfully found a way to balance this whole object
so it
on
doesn't
this
even
point.
fit down in that stem.
No, it just
sits.
rests in a little bowl.
Wow.
And it's not really much of a bowl. But some of his larger ones that have been outside, and I'll show you a couple more of these spinning ones, were huge, and large winds would blow them, and they still wouldn't fall off of their little tiny points.
Very cool.
Yeah. This piece dates from 1979, a couple years prior to the Icarus series, and the Illinois State Museum actually owns this piece. And I just love this piece because of it combines the movement that you have in the Icarus work, but it also is more purely abstract. But it also relates to his weather vane series that he did prior to this. So this is actually called weather vane number 11. So he was working in series mode at that time, and as you see how this one works, it spins. This one is different in that you just have a point that goes up and then a little bowl that the material rests on at the top. But you can see the influence of artists like Brancusi and his bird in flight. If you look at the base of this cylinder, and you get a picture of the bird in flight, it's basically the same object. It's a cylinder with this bird in flight. And Brent was always very much interested in the whole idea of flight. And throughout his later body of work, you'll see this emphasis on this desire. Well, that's what Icarus was, right?
Right.
Icarus was that desire to aspire to the heights of heaven, and also sort of a comment on the folly that can happen when you aspire for things too much.
Right.
But this whole sense of flight is in here, but this beautiful lyrical line, again, you go from this thin to this thick to this wonderful circular form, and everything balances and spins around this tiny little fulcrum.
It definitely has a heavier feel than the other that we looked at, just from size.
Right, it's much larger in scale.
But the way it moves even. It's nice.
I agree.
The artist seems to work in series. Is he still doing that today with his work?
He is. Brent is working on, actually, I think 3 concurrent series, simultaneously working on 3 different series. And we can see 2 of those right here in the Spire series, which is this piece right here, and the Crescent series. You see the little crescent at the top of that figure, but they sort of become like people. They become like male and female, and that's what he was trying to do, I think, to some degree, was to bring to the metal this sense of animus, this sense of humanness, and
gender.
And
which
gender.
Is kind of interesting.
Yeah. I love the little spire piece here, where it almost looks as though you're looking at a figure that's slightly bent, and at the very top, it looks as though it's hugging something, embracing something. Those two little wires holding these two fragile little pieces at the top of this taller. So to me, it reads almost like a father figure, where a father is holding a child.
Yeah, very good.
But again, he's all about now surface and patina and these contrasts of these beautiful materials, all done by hand. One, the metal, two, the wood, and Brent finds most of his wood locally. And he finds that balance point again on a block of stone, or on a block of wood in this case, and uses these elegant straight lines that aren't really straight.
He has another series that uses somewhat straight lines that sort of has an animal look to it. Tell me about that one.
Right, those are the croziers. And the croziers, a crozier was a shepherd's crook that was used by abbots and bishops in religious rites. So they were very decorative. So these were symbols of Christ. But these pieces are sort of abstracted versions of a crozier. They tend to have a little ornament on top, and they tend to have a bit of a swoop to them, and they seem to be all about the combination of a figure and this, again, desire to fly, because some of them, the tops look like they're rocket ships heading off into space. So.
Now he still lives in Southern Illinois, is that right?
Yes, he's still working hard. He's down in Makanda, professor emeritus at this point, and still has a lot of interaction with students, and he still is a mentor to many young blacksmiths out there.
And you have a catalog with a lot of his work in it
We
here?
have a beautiful 96-page catalog, and you can order that online at our website.
Great. Bob, thank you so much.
Thank you.
More information on the Kington exhibit and book and other museum information is available on their website, museum.state.il.us. That's all we have time for on this edition of In Life. We'd like to thank Bob Sill at the Illinois State Museum and Julie Nelson at the Quincy Art Center for their hospitality. For all of us, I'm Becky Cramblit. Thanks for watching. If you have questions or comments, email us at inlife@WSEC-TV. This program is brought to you in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and through the financial support of viewers like you. Thank you. Funding for art segments on In Life is provided by the Illinois Arts Council, a state agency. For a DVD copy of the program you've just seen, send $19.95 to Network Knowledge, P.O. Box 6248, Springfield, Illinois 62708. Be sure to include the program name, subject, and when the program aired. You can also order with your credit card by calling 800-232-3605.